Hey, what's going on, guys? I hope you all are doing well. Elliot here. Welcome back to The Fragrance Well. So not too long ago, I did a video that was basically covering what I consider to be offensive fragrances. I was kind of, referencing the fact that we're deep into the playoff season in terms of particularly the NBA and the NHL. And you got other sports going on as well. So it was just a fun play on that. Now we're going to do the defensive fragrances. Some of you guys were being a little funny in the comments saying, what's a defensive fragrance? Febreze. Haha. No, that's not what I mean by defensive fragrances. I'm going to explain it now. What I mean by a defensive fragrance is basically a fragrance that doesn't necessarily announce itself. It's more so of a fragrance maybe somebody has to come into your space more so to experience, but the scent is not basic in that regard. It's not necessarily safe. It can be safe, but that's not really the focus. It still is a fragrance that more so, let's just say, could stop them in their tracks. They're gonna find it interesting. It's not gonna smell like something they're used to smelling, but they have to come to you in essence to actually experience the scent. So let's just say these are good sillage scents, maybe scents that, kind of are reserved for your space. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're weak, doesn't mean they don't project at all, but they're not necessarily strong projectors, and they don't necessarily announce themselves, in my opinion. I've got 8 of them here that I'm gonna put on today's list. Let's go ahead and get into them. Before we do, as always, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and please hit that bell icon, enable notifications so you can be notified when I upload new videos. Let's get into it. All right, guys, first one's coming from the house of Issey Miyake, and this is going to be Nuit DC Parfum. Issey Miyake, Nuit DC Parfum. All right, so with this one, I find this to be a really nice designer fragrance from this house. I know they do cool weather based scents really well, but they're just really hard to find here in the States, but I think this is a nice one. Pretty much you're getting leather and vanilla, kind of a leather and vanilla combination with this scent. It's a very nice and smooth, easy to wear leather, in my opinion. Vanilla's not ridiculously sweet. It's perfectly balanced. You got some spice sprinkled on the top of it, and it's pretty woody at the base, best I can describe it, or at least that's how I experience it. And what I like about this is it's relatively unique, but it's not over the top, not necessarily safe, but it is different from what people might typically wear. Really good evening scent, and definitely not a super loud fragrance. This one's gonna fill your space very nicely. Good defensive fragrance in that regard. Once again, from the house of Issey Miyake, this is Nuit DC Parfum. Next one's coming from the house of Mancera. This is Sicily. Mancera, Sicily. So what I typically get from this is, first of all, this is a really good warm weather fragrance. Great for like a casual daytime outing in particular. That's where I would place it at above kind of any other situation. It's gonna be very unisex, maybe even lean slightly feminine for some guys, but you got peach in here, some very fruity, peach-like accords at the top of this fragrance. You're gonna get some slightly powdery florals. It's kind of a collection of florals. There might be jasmine, maybe even be some rose, maybe something like gardenia and that, and a lot of musk on the dry down. So it's overly pleasant, but this is a Mancera fragrance that is not a strong projector, in my opinion. It's not overly loud, but it's not weak either. But this one really fills your space very nice. It's very approachable. That's what makes it a good defensive fragrance. And it's definitely going to be different from what most people are wearing, especially men. A lot of guys aren't necessarily that comfortable wearing fruity floral fragrances, but they do very well for a lot of guys, particularly in high heat situations. And this one is a great warm weather, daytime, casual fragrance. Once again, from the house of Mancera, we have got Sicily. Next up, from the house of Lorenzo Pizzaglia, this is Black Sea. Lorenzo Pizzaglia, Black Sea. So this one here, I've talked about it quite a bit recently. Man, this is a dark aquatic fragrance. Black Sea is an appropriate name. It is kind of like a stormy sea, so to speak. It's quite salty, a little bit ozonic. It's a little bit green, kind of has a seaweed kind of smell. Not really woody with this one, kind of similar to something like Tom Ford Oud Mineral, but that's more woody, where this is more green overall, more algae-like. And this one here, it's a little bit powdery as well. This one here, I don't find to be a really loud projector, but it really fills up the space you're in and the space around you. and it intrigues people. I've had a number of different reactions from this one, none of them negative, but none of them like, oh my God, what is that? They're just like, what is that? That smells very interesting. And it's always when I kind of come into their space or they come into my space. That's why I think it's a good defensive fragrance, kind of stops people in their tracks. Really interesting fragrance. This house is kind of picking up traction in the community, and they've got really good stuff in my opinion. Once again, from the house of Lorenzo Pizzaglia, get some samples from them, check them out if you haven't already. This one in particular is Black Sea. Next up, from the house of Day 3 Fragrances, we've got Ambar Dominicano. Day 3 Fragrances, Ambar Dominicano. All right, so this one here, gonna be good more so for the cooler months, but I think on a cool summer day you could still rock this one because it's not overly loud, it's not overly rich and too dense. This is kind of like a Coke and rum style fragrance, has that cola vibe, has a little bit of a booziness to it, but in particular what sets this one apart from a lot of fragrances is the accord of Mama Juana in this red wine, honey, and spices that are steeped over a long period of time. I love that stuff. I need to get some more of it, and you do pick up the essence of that in this fragrance. That is very unique. I don't know if there's another fragrance out here that kind of tries to capture that essence, but that's what particularly makes this one special, and it's overly ambery and slightly woody on the dry down. It has a little bit of a dustiness, a powdery dustiness to it as well, maybe slightly chocolate flavored. I really enjoy this scent. It's definitely unique in that regard, and because it's not overwhelming, it does fill up your space very nicely. That's why I think this is a good defensive fragrance. People come into your space, they'll experience this one. Once again, from the house of Day 3 Fragrances, this is Ambar Dominicano. Next up, coming from the house of Cartier, this is Pasha de Cartier Parfum. Cartier, Pasha de Cartier Parfum. All right, so this one here, I don't wear this enough. I'm gonna admit that. I need to wear this more often. This is a good, slightly barbershop style fragrance, but it's much more balsamic in nature. It's a little bit dusty. I think there's benzoin in this. I do know there's fir balsam in this. A little bit of a booziness to this, giving it, in my opinion, a little bit more versatility overall. It's a very gentlemanly scent. It is quite elegant. Really could work well for more professional, more formal occasions, but it also, with that booziness that's in here and that kind of dusty, warm, sticky sweetness from the balsamic nature of this fragrance, I think you can use it for casual situations as well. Good for like maybe daytime office use, but also really good for just evening occasions as well. And again, this one's not super loud. It's very classy in terms of how the fragrance behaves, which is pretty typical of a lot of Cartier fragrances in my opinion. They're not meant to just announce themselves. You kind of come into the space and that's when people experience them. That's what I think makes this, that's why I think this one makes a good defensive fragrance in terms of the rules for it being a defensive fragrance for this video. Once again, from the house of Cartier, this is Pasha de Cartier Parfum. Next one's coming from the house of Mind Games. This is gonna be Scholar's Mate. Mind Games, Scholar's Mate. So this is one of my newest additions to the collection. It's my first from the house of Mind Games. And when you first get your nose on this, you're probably gonna think this pretty much smells like Le Labo Santal 33. And it does have similarities to it, but let me just say that this one has much more going on than Santal 33 does. And in particular, once it really dries down, like after the first 5 minutes, you'll notice that it's not really Santal 33. Maybe based on it a little bit, but it's definitely its own thing. In particular, there is a note of fig milk in this, giving it a much creamier texture than you would find in Santal 33. Not quite as dry, definitely doesn't have that pickly smell that some people associate with it. That's kind of the biggest difference. The vetiver that's in this is quite smoky. I find the overall mood of this fragrance to be darker than what Santal 33 is. And now I'll be honest, in terms of projection with this, it doesn't feel like this is a loud projector. I haven't really kind of tested that enough yet, but strong sillage. When this really kind of sits into the skin, it is there. It does radiate off the skin, but it's not a room filler. I wouldn't call it a scent that would necessarily announce itself, but it is something that I think will stop people in their tracks, particularly if they like something similar to a Santal 33. I think this one still has that ability to capture people's attention in that way, but it will be within your space. If they approach you, that's when they smell it. If you go into their space, they'll catch it once you've been into their space, more so than, you know, from across the room. Really good scent. I'll talk about this one a little bit more in another video because there's a lot of elements to this that I think make this a very interesting and fluid scent. It moves, it doesn't stay the same. Once again, from the House of Mind Games, this is Scholar's Mate. Next up, from the House of Mason Francis Kirkjohn, we've got Aqua Cologne Forte. Mason Francis Kirkjohn, Aqua Cologne Forte. So this is actually my morning scent for today. Oh man, this is so refreshing, so calming, and a little bit unique in that it is a tea fragrance, but with more of a green background behind it. This one has a strong note of fennel in it. That's something that I haven't come across in any other fragrance. If anybody's, come across a fragrance where fennel is like a really forward note in the fragrance, put it down in the comments below. Be curious to see what it is. But yeah, green tea, fennel, lime in the top, and a lot of musk at the base of the fragrance. Amazing scent, great for the summertime. This is the perfect time to be wearing this. And also, while I do find that this is definitely not a weak fragrance, pretty much lasts all day on my skin, it's more of a closer to the skin scent in that it fills up your space very nicely. I don't find this to be a really super strong projector, so it's not gonna announce itself across the room, but you're gonna smell awesome in my opinion. When people come into your space with this fragrance, it's gonna play solid defense in that regard, stop them in their tracks, so to speak. Once again, from the House of Mason Francis Kirkjohn, we've got Aqua Cologne Forte. All right, final fragrance for this list. From the House of Prada, we've got Luna Rossa Black. Prada Luna Rossa Black. Give me a second, I'm gonna go ahead and spray this. I haven't sprayed this in a while. I'm sure it doesn't smell at the atomizer anymore. So in my opinion, from the Luna Rossa line, this is still the most interesting fragrance from that line. Quite unique, so I can understand why it's not necessarily the best seller, but it is good to see that it's still on the shelves. You're gonna find this to be powdery, slightly spicy. It's gonna be dark, it's ambery, it's kind of a dark ambery scent, and this is great for the evening times in my opinion. And I think it's not so heavy that you could probably wear it on any evening occasion, as long as it's not ridiculously hot out, but probably more centered for the cooler months. I don't find this fragrance to be ridiculously loud either. It's one that also just fills up your space very, very nicely, leaves a nice scent trail, nice sillage. People will probably experience this more so when they come a little bit closer to you rather than you announcing yourself from across the room. And it's unique scent. Most people are not gonna be smelling like this. I think that uniqueness of this scent is one that is capable of maybe stopping people in their tracks. Now, again, when I've been saying stopping people in their tracks, there's no guarantee of any of this, right? I'm just saying that the whole idea of a defensive fragrance is that people will come closer to you and they'll smell you then, and that's when the opportunity for them to say, hey, what is that you're wearing, presents itself, where an offensive fragrance, they might be a little bit further away from you and catch it before you even show up. That's the whole idea of this concept of these videos. So once again, from the House of Prada, this is Luna Rossa Black. All right, guys, that's gonna do it for this video. A couple of fun videos, just having some fun every now and then. Let me know down in the comments below, based on how I described the defensive fragrance concept, what would you say is a good defensive fragrance for you? Looking forward to seeing what you guys have to say. Appreciate you guys watching all the way into the end. Please remember to be well and smell well, and I'll see you in the next episode of The Fragrance Well. Have a good one.